As you know, we're doing this for the Stateline Speedway, part of its 70th anniversary, focusing in on Stateline Speedway late model champions, of which you were in 1985. A little bit about your mom and dad.
Okay, Mom was a registered nurse, died young of cancer. Dad worked at the local steel mill in Irvine, which Irvine's 200 people. It's a small town, and but he was not enthused with racing at all. So, I had an older brother, 4 years older, that when he was 15 bought a car, 59 Ford Galaxy, and was gonna be a street car, and a neighbor guy talked him into cutting it up for a race car. They got it all cut up. The guy left town, and the cops called, and my brother had abandoned a vehicle down there, and he said no, and hence to say Dad didn't care for dirt track racing after that.
So was there something that gave you an aha moment?
It started out actually in 6th grade. I had a school teacher that was a motorhead, and he called it a science project. He brought in a small block 265 Chevy, and for a science project, he showed us how to put the motor together, how to read, how to do plastic gauge, how to run the torque. We're 12 years old, but man, I'm in my glory. And then fast forward to about 71, Warren County had come up with a VOTEC for machine shop, and I had signed up for that, even though I was going to Youngsville High School. The machine shop part had a guy that everybody down our area knows as Walt Smith. They called him Doc Smith, but he was a genius when it come to fixing cars. But he built motors for Gary Littlefield. Well, he knew I liked performance and that. He had a boring bar and wanted somebody to run it. So he brought it into the VOTEC, a Van Norman 727 boring bar, and we bored and sleeved motors for him and fixed them up. And then my neighbors down over the hill, Larry Donaldson, which Gary run Tri-City Motor Speedway. Larry Donaldson and Bob Mack, they raced there also, and so I'd ride to the races with them, and that got my interest going, the start of it. And then I went to work for Jim Scott, and the rest is kind of history.
So, well, let's talk a little bit about that. So you're in VOTEC. Now, that's a term. It's a vocational technology, which was part of the high school. Now, how did that actually work? Was that post-school or during school?
No, during school. A couple, 3 hours a day, we'd ride the bus to Warren. And I worked in the machine shop part, or, trained but the auto mechanics was right across the street. Weld shop was right next door to that. And back then, if you were doing what you're supposed to do, the teachers were good about letting us work together and learn together. But I never started racing until after I was out of school.
Did you actually create a car at that time?
No. A couple years out of school, actually thought I wanted to get into it, and John Hedman had my very first car. It was an old, I think, 37 coupe. And we bought that and took it home and spent most of 74 getting it together and run it some at the end of 74. And
I am looking at a picture, which you don't have, but I'll put it on here. And it shows 1974 Sportsman, Lars Huling. And there's a reply here by a guy named Vern Stroop, who says, "I love this old coupe. First race car I had the privilege of working on. It was the beginning of the Irvine VOTEC. The lessons learned beginning with this car carried me into a learned lifelong career in the body and paint business. Thank you, Lars." I assume that's your car.
Yep, and he lived about 4 houses from us. Like I say, the town was small, and everybody in town learned how to run the welder, the torch, and he was a body man, so he painted that car and lettered it. And
so that was your first car?
That was my first race car, yeah.
And the number was 75?
Yep.
Why that?
Actually had gone to some ARCA races with Jim Scott, and his daughter was graduating in 75. And when I built the car, I had no idea what to use for a number, and she says 75 would be a good one, so that's what we put on it.
Did you stick with that number, Lars?
Till 81, and went to drive, sold the Sportsman's cars, and went to drive for Bill Southwell, and he took the 75 number. We'd run 3-4 weekends at the end of the year and the start of the next year, and Craig Briggs and I were out on three-wheelers, and I had an accident and dislocated a shoulder. Jay Plyler ended up driving the car, some Chubb Frank, some Scott Gray. Bill had a lot of different drivers after that. Well, I didn't have a car then, so Pat McGee called, and he said, "Why don't you come drive my car?" Him and Keith Clark had separated. Keith got his own car, and Pat was sponsored by Budweiser, so hence the Junior Johnson number 11. So we run that the whole time I run for Pat.
I jumped over a few years. So really, in 1974, let's start back there. That's your first racing experience at Stateline?
Yes.
And what did you think? You're going out on the track, and the first time where there actually is a green flag, and you no longer can just
talk about it.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, I realized I didn't have the talent I thought I did. Yeah, we'd win a heat race now and then, but it was a lot more to it than what I thought there was.
So in 74, who was really, 74, 75, those early days, who were the big dogs?
Bobby ran a little bit. Billy Snars was still running. Trying to think who would have been. Bob Harvey from Waterford. He was one of the good ones. A little bit later on, of course, Craig Briggs, Bruce Hordusky, Dick Barton, they all come to sportsman class, but I can't tell you the years.
But was that so that's your first, do you remember your first race?
No.
No? So that first couple of years, who was your pit crew? I mean, did it consist of?
That Vern Stroop there talked about it. Dick Daly, Randy Rollins, they were all from our area. Then Randy started his own car, and Dick went with him. So then I picked up Jim Greeley, Bruce Wickwire, through them years.
Yeah.
And most guys only worked a year or two, and they realized how much work it was and disappeared.
So what was a normal week for you? You know, you raced normally on, I guess, Saturdays and Sundays, right?
Yeah. Normally, I was a diesel mechanic, worked on semi-trucks, 40 hours a week, worked part-time driving tilt bed for Jim Scott, and then in the spare time we raced cars, had a lot of fun.
So you're working for Jim Scott.
Part-time at that time, yeah.
Are you gleaning some information from him while you're working with him?
Oh, yeah. He was such a wealth of knowledge and willing to share. That's the best part with him. Yeah.
But he was doing late models at that time, or was he also doing some sportsmen?
He was doing late models at that time, and also some ARCA. Short story, we took the ARCA car to the B&H Speed Shop had kind of built with him. It was a petty kit car, and we went out and run the Acme, I don't remember how many lap it was or mile it was, that Butch Hartman won. On the track, and with about 3 laps to go, Jim pulled in, lost oil pressure, and we were all panicking because that was the motor we were going to put in the dirt car after we changed cam. And we looked underneath and seen the rod hanging out of the pan and realized this isn't good. We get home and come to find out it wasn't our rod. Here somebody else had blowed up on the track, and that piece of connecting rod was stuck in the oil pan and dumped our oil out, and Jim had shut it down. And we swapped pans for the circle track pan and the cam, and he put it in his dirt late model.
You're kidding.
Oh, it was, we thought we were really done for, and the rest is history. Yeah.
So this is late 70s, early 80s, your sportsman is your thing, and as Randy Anderson, the source of all knowledge, I mean, he's the
Amen. Yes.
Wikipedia of it all, sent me a note, said, attached are the sportsman's race winners for 80 and 81 to illustrate how dominant Lars was those 2 years. He won so often that Leonard Briggs changed the sportsman's class rules. How did that work? How did you get so good?
Well, let's back up. Come back after the coupe car. in 75, I was in Erie, and one guy was in the infield, another guy was against the cushion, and I thought I could thread the needle. And halfway through, they come together, and so I endoed 3 times down the front straightaway. And then we built a car the next year, and partway through the year, I had trouble with my hands, which I've had a real bad history of hand trouble. And so Jim Scott ended up driving for a few weeks, and it was the best thing that ever happened, because then he got the suspension working for us to where we were a little bit competitive. And he taught us at the same time more on front end alignments and scale in a car. And then 77, 8, ended up buying a Sportsman. Tom Jarrett had run it a little bit out to Conneaut. Yeah, that's the first homemade project car.
Yep, okay.
That Jim had run it, but we built it too much like a NASCAR car. We had truck arms underneath the rear suspension and really heavy. But then the next year we bought the car from, I don't know if Tom Jarrett owned it or B&H Speed Shop. Run that car for a year and had troubles again with my hands, so I sold that car to Craig Briggs and Toby Jordan. So I took 79 off. In the meantime, I wanted to learn about cars and what made them work, so we went to Florida to Southard Chassis School, which was a 3-day in-classroom, how to set up suspensions, what does what, front end geometry, 1 day of driving on asphalt, 1 day driving on dirt. And I thought going fast was sliding the car all the way through the corner, and we got to asphalt. They were 2-seat cars, and you would ride with the instructor first, and then you would ride with another student. And this student that was with me from asphalt racer from Connecticut, and I'd go in the corner. We were in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, and the tires were squealing and howling, and we got out of the car, and he cut me up one side and down the other, and he says, "You are never going to race." He says, you're forcing the car. He said, "Let the car work for you." So we spent the whole day together, and it took me 100 laps to get smooth in the corner, out of the corner, and I learned a lot from that. And we went to a Randy Sweet class. That was more on front end geometry. But then I had trouble with my hands in 79, so I took the year off. Went to Oswego Speedway up in upstate New York and watched the super modified runs. And the motors out behind the left front tire, big wings, everything is designed for left side weight. Well, at that time, Stateline and Erie's were almost like asphalt. Jerry Frank took care of them and kept them as smooth as glass, but he'd let them get hard to keep the dust down, I think, more than anything. And it was the dirt that was on the track. So fast forward towards the end of that year, Craig Briggs had got hurt. I drove the car that I'd sold, him and Toby, and won a feature in Erie with that. Then a couple weeks later, Crowbar, one of my crew, Bob Corbar, he got hurt, and I drove his car. And liked it, but it was same as everybody else's car, not faster. And fast forward through the winter, he come to me and he says, "Hey, why don't you drive my car next year?" And I said, "Well, I've got a crazy idea. I want to build a super modified, style modified." And he thought about it, and he said, "I'll make you a deal." And we flipped a coin, and I won the coin flip. And we drove the car off his tilt bed into my garage, completely race ready, about a month before the season, and took a torch to it and cut it off at the firewall and started building. But Crowbar, he was a genius as far as reading stuff. He says, "If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right." And I said, "Well, I don't want to break the rules, but there's only 20 rules." So we took the rule book and interpreted the best of our ability, which says must run stock steering components, which stock steering just meant stock production parts. So we went through the junkyards and studied, and we knew we wanted to have the steering box on the right-hand frame rail. So we went to the junkyard, found a late 60s Chevy truck box mounted on the outside of the left front frame rail, which we mounted that on the inside of the right frame rail, put a Corvette quick steering worm in it, put the idler arm on the left side, and stock center link stock steering. And at that time, Jim Scott was Franklin dealer. They made us a super short left rear axle, super long right rear axle. The motor was over behind the left front tire. I was actually in the center of the car, and it's probably one of the first straight right-hand frame rail cars built. We were a little ahead of our time, but got a little bit of a late start because of all the modifications we made for that year. But we ended up winning 15 features that year with that car, and they had 13 rule changes at the end of the year. And according to the article, 9 of them were our car in particular, but the other ones were just to cover the bases so that they didn't have any other problems. But we had to put the motor back in the center, back forward, had to cut the wing down. A lot of little things that we actually almost had too much left side weight in the car, but it still worked really well compared to what we were running against. So at the end of that year, with all the rule changes, we put the motor back in the center, the driver back on the left. But we had all winter to do it, so we spent all winter cutting weight off everything we could. We started to realize then that weight was really important. So, put the brake calipers on the mill, took second gear out of the transmission, anything we could do to shed weight. And that car was actually quite a bit faster than the offset car. And we won 21 features that year, starting in the back. Because if you won this week, you started, do you remember, 16th, I think?
16th or 18th.
16th or 18th. And 13 in a row was our best. And then the oil pan failed to keep the parts in one night. And we blew a motor at Erie and then come back and then won a whole bunch more at the end of that year.
What did that car weigh, Lars?
2,300 pounds. But everybody else was scared to death of small block 400 Chevys, and everybody run either a 350 or they'd put a 350 crank in a 400, which made a 377. We knew they had a nodular iron crank, but we thought it's not sustained RPMs. So what I did is actually got a hold of Gary Fosberg, which Bobby Snars run all 377s, and I bought all his 400 cranks. And so every time we would freshen the motor, we'd just throw the crank out, put a new crank in it. And we had pretty good luck with them. But we had full 406 where everybody else was running. And that was part of our advantage too. We really had a lot of power. Wing-wise, a lot of people were still on a sheet of plywood up there for a wing. Kid in Titusville, Hasbrook, they had a salvage yard there, and they had a Piper Cub get wrecked. And he told me at the track one night, he said, hey, if you want a wing, come on up. So we bought both wings and took all the salvageable pieces, and that's what we run for wings. But even there, they said 2-foot sides on the wings. Well, we did, but we offset them so the right side was down 2 foot and the left side was up 2 foot. So you had a side wing also, and that was one of the other things they had outlawed. But and then one night we decided we needed more traction because the new motor we built was quite a bit more powerful, and so we put an 18-inch spoiler on the back. And Leonard come out that week, and new rules: spoiler cannot be any higher than the interior tin. So when I come home, Crow said, "What do you say?" And I said, "He wants the interior tin raised 18 inches." So needless to say, we cut it out and we raised the interior tin 18 inches, and we won the next night at Stateline. And Leonard had a 4-foot carpenter's level and come out on the track, and he looked in there, and I mean, you could look underneath the middle wing and see the rear end. I mean, it was. And then he said, no spoilers, no wings. So we, but Leonard was a lot of fun. I like to get his goat. I didn't want to cheat against the rules, but I like to stretch him, have fun with it that way.
Did you get a sense when you came into pits in an evening that almost Leonard would say, what the hell's Lars doing this week?
Oh yeah, they put a bounty on us, extra money if you could beat us, and we were still running. And actually nobody ever collected because that was the night we'd lost the motor, the 14th night. And
so explain for the camera what that really meant, bounty. I mean, an extra money or points?
Yep, extra money for anybody that could beat us, and if we were still running, if they could just flat out run us.
Okay.
And it was like $100, but it was only $300 to win the race. So was quite an incentive. And
Well,
you know,
when we do the video and we actually run the list of your wins in 80 and 81 with all the yellow highlights here, it's just borders on the unreal. And you can actually see, it's very clear, when you say you got started late in 1980, where you don't appear at all, just not anywhere, and then you show up and you win everything. And the only time your name isn't either first or second, you clearly must not have been there. I mean,
yeah.
Unbelievable. Did the other drivers, listen to the who's who list. There, Craig Briggs, Dick Barton, Maury Otander, Bruce Bordusky, Buddy Erickson. These are not slouches. And you're just whipping them, excuse the French, but you're whipping their ass for 2 straight years. Somebody do they come over and look at your setups?
Oh, yeah. Sweetland boys. Andy Sweetland. He says, I like your car. I said, well, build one. Well, can I measure it? Come on down. And him and his wife come down and they measured everything. And his brother Bob was running the big block modifieds at the time. But Andy's car was almost a complete copy. And then Toby and Rick Briggs built one that was almost a complete copy when we were driving on the correct, or what Leonard called the correct side. Yeah. There was so many little things on that car that the normal eye didn't see. Back in that era, you couldn't, there's no computer programs, there's no books on dirt track racing. Everything we learned from IndyCar racing. We knew that if you wanted to go around a corner fast, that the inside front tire has to turn sharper than the outside. What makes it do it? So we'd buy the IndyCar books and study. Okay, you got to have Ackerman in the car. How do we get it? Where do we want the roll center? Where do we want the instant center, which is the center point of where the car wants to rotate? How much distance you want that between that and the roll center so that the car would transfer weight rather than just skid the tires across the track. And we did a lot on front end geometry. Anybody could hook one up, but then you couldn't steer it. Well, this car, you could steer it. Part of the issue on them days was you could run new good tires on the front, but you had to run Stateline Aries recaps on the back, which I can see their point. They were saving us. We could buy a recap for about 1/3 of the price of new, but their recapping process wasn't 100%, where they would change rubber compounds and not really clean the molds. So we would take a quarter or anything and go scrub the tires. And if the tire got greasy and shiny, we'd leave the tire there for the next person. If you'd scrub that tire and it would start to grain up like it was a good rubbery compound, we'd scarf them tires up. You were allowed sway bars then. Well, you weren't supposed to have weight jackers on the wheels, but it didn't say anything about the sway bar. So I had a sway bar adjuster in the car to where when you would take off, the front tires would grab instantly. The recap tires, you had to generate a little bit of heat in them to get them going. So like if you had a restart or something like that, you could back it off just a little bit until the back tires got the same adhesion, and then just give her a little tweak and tighten the car back up again. So you could compensate for different track conditions. And that car was all about handling. I know it had superior power. It'd get down the straightaway. But
well, just again, for description purposes, 80, 81, what was the car?
it was the front end geometry was homemade by Crowbar, and the rest of the car was just Siegels and Son. Go by tubing and square tubing and or rectangular tubing, 2x3 for the frames, and roll cage tubing. And Jim had a pipe bender. We could bend our pipe, and everything on the right hand side was straight door bars. The left hand side was bowed out for me to set in, but it was all homemade suspension, leaf spring car. We were allowed coilovers on the front at that point.
So I'm again reading from all the source of all knowledge. You won 44 sportsman races between Stateline and Aries, the third all time, behind only a guy, I think I've heard of him, Ronnie Blackmer and Bobby Schnars. Was there a point where you'd say, I'm almost too good for this?
Oh no, we loved it. we had so much fun, and the people that we raced against treated us. I mean, they respected us, that we just had that superior of a car. And but come to the end of that year, Bill Southwell wanted to get into racing.
This was 81.
81, at the fall of 81, and Bill decided he wanted to get into the racing business and made us an offer. So Pat McGuire from Erie, him and his dad come down and bought the sportsman car, and we went running at the end of the 81 in Lernerville, Motordrome, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania Motor Speedway for Bill. Run, I don't know, 3-4 weeks. And the worst, one of the things with that is the first night out in a late model, Bill, being Bill, I don't know if you remember, he rented a Greyhound bus with all the people from Warren County to come down and watch our debut. But we had a really good car, a really good motor, and we run second to the hero down there, Bob Waring, that night at Lernerville. And I thought it was going to be easy after that, but realized them people are tough. But we run good, and then run the first 3 or 4 weeks the next year, and that's when Craig and I were out. Actually, it was at Bill's birthday party, and there might have been alcohol involved. Racing three-wheelers, come down off one road and hit another road, and run out of talent, hit a tree on the other side, and broke a collarbone. And that's when we put Jay Plyler in the car for a few weeks.
Had you been running late models at all while you were racing sportsmen?
No.
So that was a complete
new ball game, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of difference in it. Yeah. The sportsmen were very, very forgiving. You know, the motors were back, and we were allowed pretty near the same tire, 11-inch tire, and you could really hustle late model. Late model took finesse. You had to be gentle with it.
So was that the biggest transition, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're talking late 81, 82. Did you continue late models during that time period?
81, when I got hurt, Bill kind of disowned us because I got hurt, and bought what we had left off our sportsman. Like, we'd taken some of the stuff off the sportsman, like the distributor, because they had tack drive, the carburetor that Crow had built and made it more drivable. He bought all the rest of our stuff, and I was just going to take the year off. Well, that was when Pat McGee and Keith Clark separated ways, and so I went to driving for Pat McGee at that point.
So you're not an owner, you're a driver.
I'm a driver at that point, yep. Yeah. And that's when we changed to a number 11.
And were you working on McGee's car?
Yeah.
It was kept at your house?
No, and not at first. At first we kept it, was it Stedman? Up Climber Way.
Yeah.
Because a lot of his sponsorship was Envirogas, and different ones through the years. Schultz Chevy sponsored it some. Ronnie Moore was good at sponsoring Lakeview Hotel out of Mayville. But the first year or so, maybe 2 years, we would drive up there all the time. But then finally he just let it bring it to our house. And we still did most all the engine work. Because we always build our own motors. Envirogas did buy us one good motor, a 388 Malcott. And we got that when we bought the car. And
what was the chassis at the time?
I'm thinking it was a Bolt to start with. I could never make that car steer. It worked good on Sharon, the big tracks, or the wet clay tracks where you'd really slide the car. But on Stateline, it didn't fit my driving style because I was trying to drive the car. We made it work, but I didn't understand 4-bars at the time, and the technology isn't there like it is today where you have so much rear steer. We won races with it, but we had a chance to buy, like I say, probably around 84, had a chance to buy, and it was a chassis out of down south called a Gigolo chassis, wishbone rear suspension that Brad Malcott had built for Larry Moore, and they had taken it like Pennsboro, places like that. Once we bought the car and got it home, realized that it was no more than the manufacturer's car than the frame. It had Howell spindles on it, had a lot of control arms, upper control arms were different for roll centers. He had done his homework, or done a lot of testing with that car, and made it really drivable. And the drier and the slicker the tracks got, that car was so superior. And during that same period, Scott and Turner wanted to get out of racing, so I bought out what was Scott and Turner Racing Enterprises, which they sold Hoosier tires, Franklin Quick Change, wheels, goggles, oil, anything you would buy at the racetrack. And my brother-in-law at the time, Bill Handhold, run that, but it made it so we could get our tires at a better price. But Hoover Racing in Hartford, Ohio, was the distributor. So that's when we started racing Sharon Speedway on Friday nights. I could go out, pick up the tires I needed for the weekend, and bring them back and then sell them at Stateline and Erie's. So that's what we made a good deal for us. Go out for dinner on Friday night and race. And so.
And then you'd be an entrepreneur on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
So in 84, 85, though, you sort of really peak out on super late model. I mean, you're the 1985 Stateline Super Late Model Champion. What was the difference?
The car. That car was so superior. But by then they'd changed the tracks where they weren't asphaltish. They were more slippery. But we run Sharon on Friday nights and won 5 features there, and the Point Championship. Won 5 features at Stateline that year. And I believe we won 3 at Erie's. I don't think we were at Erie's Point champ, but we were like the circuit champ at that point. But that car worked really well. 86, I had to have another surgery, and so we were late getting into the racing in 86. But we run that car, I don't remember how many years. Sold it to Jim Duffy, which his family had an excavating business, took care of Smithport Speedway. And he run that. And I'm trying to think what we run the next couple of years. Maybe that, I think I'm wrong. I think we had a Dillon chassis in the earlier years, and I think we had the Bullet chassis in 87 and 8. And we won some features, but that car, like I say, wasn't real drivable to my liking. And then I think 88 is when Pat got out of racing, and so we went to Siegels and Sons and loaded the truck up with steel and come home and build a new late model. And that was quite a creation. Troy Johnson, he had taken some years off to help his son Matt grow up. He come down and helped design it, and Crowbar's still with us at that point. And we ran that car up to the end until I quit in 95 when I had more hand problems. But we were still winning features. Last year we run it, which would have been 95, we still won opening night at Stateline and 3 of the first 4 at Knox. And then my hands had another surgery, and Dave Norton wanted the motor. And I'd never had a good motor, and I had a chance to buy in 95 a all aluminum small block that one of the sprint car drivers had built, that they had I think 410 cubic inch roll back then, and which would have been a 3 3/4 inch or 3.8 stroke crank. And he did that on the front cylinder, but on the rest of the cylinders he accidentally slipped in 4 inch. So he had a 15 or 18 inch cubic inch motor. Well, he got caught, and he sold us a motor for a little bit of nothing. And so we put our heads and stuff on it, and I never got to drive it. When I put that motor in is when I had trouble, and we put Troy Johnson in it, and he finished it out until we sold the car.
So in 1985, again, for the camera, they'll see the yellow highlighting. You dominated, certainly, the beginning part of the season, from April on right through July, and then just, I don't want to say you didn't win, but you were finished second and thirds and stuff like that. Were you conscious that you were at the point standings where you were? Did you drive differently?
No. We were conscious, but in the middle of all that, we'd had and I don't even know where at, somebody got into the rear of us really hard and bent the rear frame rails. And the over the rear axle, somebody had originally had 2x2 tubing over the axle, and the rest of the frame was 2x3. And when we replaced it, we put all 2x3 on. And so for a few weeks, we were off on our suspension heights by an inch, and just stupid overlooking. You know, we just so used to setting it up before, and we lost the handle of the car for a while, until we caught what we had done wrong, and it was a mistake on our part, just overlooking. You know, you get too many fingers in there. And
Who were the guys you were competing with during that time period? I'm just looking at names, and maybe you can react to me. Had Craig Briggs, Dick Barton, Dave Turner, Ron Davies, Dick Litz, just Chubb Frank, just to name a few, which are pretty big names.
Yeah, Chubb was really coming into it. Ronnie was one of the first ones with Botten cars. Skip had Botten cars then. Polaro had Botten cars. Most everybody were in Botten chassis and Botten motors. So at that point, it got a lot more competitive than what it had been. I mean, it was the homemade technology. Just, you know, they can call a manufacturer on Monday morning and say, my car is doing this. Well, they have 100 cars out there. They have 100 people giving them information, what works, what don't. We had the one. We had to figure out our own ideas, but I was happy to get it, but we didn't win the points at Erie, and that made me mad. And same with the sportsman. We won 21 features and didn't win the Erie's championship, and I just couldn't believe it, you know. But the bad luck we had was Erie. It was bad luck, you know. Like the one night we blew a motor, we didn't finish. Well, and Craig and them, you know, Hordeski and all the guys, they were right on your bumper every night. So you only had to lose a point or two, and you were in trouble.
Well, talk about being on the bumper. We ask the question often, because you had so much success, but given the competition and as you go into that final lap, is there anybody you really wouldn't want on your rear?
Not by the time I got there. They were, like I say, like everybody else says, Tom Dill, and what fun he was. But the guys, by the time we got there, they showed a lot of respect. From Barton to Skip to, well, Craig even come out with that V6 one year. We just all run really hard, but we respected each other, and I'm not big enough to be a fighter, so hey, crowbar, he helped, but yeah, but that era right there, that was a good bunch of guys to race with. That was fun. I mean, you'd have your, you know, nightly little once in a whiles, but nothing on purpose, I don't feel.
Did you socialize among the drivers that time period?
Afterwards, yeah. Too much. No, back then, you know, you'd bring a bushel of corn and somebody else bring it. We had Budweiser for sponsorship, so we'd bring beer. Somebody else would bring hot dogs, and we'd sit around there for hours after the races were over. And of course, we're only a half hour from home, you know. But you know, if you broke down, you need something tomorrow, and we had spare parts, we'd give it to you, and vice versa. And but there was a lot of socializing, and nobody would get stupid to drive home to where the cops were bothers, because you were in Bustye County, and you know, if you were going to be an idiot, they were going to get you. So, no.
Did you likewise, aside from Jim Scott, who you've already talked about, were there other drivers at the time, maybe more senior, that you kind of looked towards for guidance, or you get on the phone and say, hey, such and such occurred. Do you have any thought?
Yeah. Well, when I first started running a late model a lot, I run a lot of places Lou Blaney run. He run sprints and then went to big block modifieds, ended up owning Sharon Speedway. And especially going to other tracks. He was a wealth of knowledge, and for some reason he took us under his wing, and I'd never been as successful at Sharon if it wouldn't have been for him. Stateline and Erie's, Dave Turner and Jim Scott both were local guys for us. When my wife Brenda and I first got hooked up, we lived in a little mobile home not far from Dave Turner. He let us use his garage for a year. We kept our car there and serviced it. He was still racing, and he would, you know, help us along the way. But that's about it, I guess. Local people. They were all good as far as getting parts. I say a lot of times we build our own motors, so we would buy used parts. Our wet sump system come off. Skip Furloughs, he put a new system on to keep things fresh. We bought that. We needed some rods. We went to Chubb for that motor we broke. We got some good rods off him. Ronnie Davies was always good about selling us. He'd experiment with new stuff, and remember, we'll have a night or two on it. But if we needed something, he always treated us right on parts like that. So, but
As you look back at almost, 20-plus year career, were there kind of 2 or 3 highlight races or nights where you'd say, this was really big for me?
yeah, there was a big 83 lapper at the track one night we won. We took the little car, the sportsman car, to Connet one night, and it was all big block modifieds, and Alan Johnson and Jack Johnson, all them guys were down there, and we run 20 laps with Lou Blaney side by side. And I guess go back to the heat race. Ed Lynch Sr. had a big block modified with a huge big block in it, and our car handled so superior that in the heat race we started side by side, and he'd go by me down the straightaway like 20 mile an hour faster, and he'd throw it sideways into the corner. I'd drive in farther, turn left, drive out, and beat him out of the corner. Next lap, he'd drive her in harder, and about the 5th lap, he went right off the end of the track because we had his attention. But we run 3rd, and I was so proud to be the only small block in the field. And, we didn't win, but for a little homemade car, Crow was sitting with Bob Waring, and Bob just loved it. It was neat. It was a lot of fun. Some of the bigger races, it's Stateline Erie. Probably won more of the big ones with the sportsman car than we did the late model. But it was nice for us. Well, like the other night, we went to Stateline for the old timers night, and I used to drive for Pat McGee. His son Mike won the sportsman, and Crowbar hadn't been there in forever. And Crow and I got to go down and be in victory circle with him, and it's just neat to see the whole thing come full circle. Because Mike was such a little guy back then that he don't hardly remember.
So, you were described as Lars Huling was a household name at Stateline Speedway for decades. Lars was a fierce competitor in several divisions, including the Sportsman, UMP Modifieds, and Super Late Models, where you won the championship. Do you consider yourself a fierce competitor?
I run hard. My biggest thing is I had so much trouble with my hands. I've had 10 surgeries on my hands that I didn't get to run full seasons for points. And I didn't have the money. Like I say, most all the years we were in homemade cars and homemade motors. And especially in the late 80s, early 90s, it was hard to be competitive with homemade cars and homemade motors. And if we'd had like I say, the money that Pat and them put into the car, we could be really competitive. But on homemade stuff, you really had to run hard to try to keep up.
You bring up the economics of it all in a way. How did it work for you with winnings and sponsorship and stuff? Did it make ends meet?
No. Well, the sportsman days, if it wasn't for the crew paying their own way, I mean, I was just a diesel mechanic. I didn't have a lot of money. Every penny we had, we put back in the car. But a lot of those guys paid their own way the first quite a few years until we made enough money to. Now the sportsman days, once we started winning a lot, yeah. But we didn't have any money in the car. When Crowbar brought his car down, we used his front end, fuel cell, seat, and a few other things. We had $2,300 in the whole car. Well, now they've got more than that in the shock absorbers, And it paid $300 to win, which you could make money. We were running recap tires. They were, I don't remember, $40-50 a piece, where new tires were $1.25. So that was competitive. Now, it got the late models. It got a little bit more expensive, but it paid $800 and then $1,000 to win. So you could still pay the bills. In '85, we made some pretty decent money, but we put all the money back into the car. I didn't take a penny for driving. I was just thankful for the opportunity to go to a lot of different tracks and win some different tracks, and it was a lot of fun.
Give me your best Leonard Briggs story.
Probably the spoiler deal. And he didn't like that. Jerry Frank had one which was another track owner. Craig and I were running for a late model race, and he had tires around the infield, and Craig went around the tires to pass me for the lead, and then somebody crashed in 1 and 2, and I went inside of him and the tires to get the lead and end up winning the race. And Jerry come up and fined us for passing inside the tires, and then him and Crowbar got into a little scuffle, and Jerry Frank come up and started poking Crowbar in the chest, and Crowbar asked him to back off, and he didn't, and next thing I know, Jerry had a few stitches in his face, and Crow got thrown out of the track out of the pits. He was allowed to come in the stands, but he got thrown out of the pits for, I don't remember, 4 weeks or something. So that probably wasn't one of the better stories, but that's
A story nevertheless.
yeah, it was a story. But Leonard and I we'd butt heads all summer long, and as soon as racing season's over, we'd jump in the motorhomes and go to the NASCAR race. Go to Charlotte. His motorhome kept quitting after an hour every time going down the road. He said, "Bring your tools, we're going to fix my motorhome." Well, we made it to Oil City when his motorhome quit. Pulled off the side of the road, and Crow and I up under the hood and found somebody had crimped the ignition wire with just a little butt connector, and it would get hot and it would shut the ignition off. And we found it and cut it out and soldered it together and fixed the motorhome for him. But that's how Leonard was. He run a tight ship, but he was fair. But I always went where there wasn't rules. I thought that way they can't really condemn us, It's
Until they graded it.
until they graded it at the end of the year.
Lars, do you have a good Franny story? Because you raced under his...
regime for a while. And Franny was good to us, because when we had to put the left or the right side car back to a left side car, we had a Vega body on the wrong set car, and told Franny we needed a Vega body. He said, "Come down, pick one out." He'd give us the body. If we needed a new block to build a motor or something, he would give you a short block. Franny was Franny. He had tight reins, and he had a weird way of doing it, but we didn't have a problem with him. I don't know.
Did you ever get caught up, and I know there's a period of time when some of the late model drivers did not have the loyalty to him, and then they went elsewhere. Were you caught up in that?
Not so much. Like I say, we were already missing a lot of races them years, so once in a while I would stray away. But I usually did it like on a Friday night when Stateline Erie's wasn't running. There was a few years in there that Erie went to, I can't remember who bought Erie. They went to Friday nights. So then we'd go to like Knox or Tri-City or something on Sunday nights or whenever. But we didn't have the money to travel a lot. We did travel some, but it was a pick and choose. I did it some under Pat. We went to like Pennsboro and that. But our own homemade car, we went to Hidden Valley and won a big invitational at the end of the year down there. And I think we went to Knox because they had a good ice cream booth. I'm not sure. It was just close to home.
I got to tell you, this is like a master class listening to you and the way you describe in detail and to a layman, and I'm a layman, trust me, I'd have to check half of what you just said, but you're just so articulate. I don't know, and there's no disrespect to anybody we've interviewed, but I'm not sure anybody else could do what you've just done.
Well, I was probably a better, and with Crowbar's help, a better mechanic than a driver. But like in the sportsman days, we could build a lot of horsepower, but it always wasn't 100% drivable. And the nice thing about like dealing with Crow, it's hard, like Erie Speedway, halfway down the back straightaway, it had a moisture area come across the track. And if you had a lot of horsepower, when you go through that, the car would want to break loose. Crow, it's hard to control the throttle. And he built a roller gas pedal. This is way before you could buy any of that stuff. Where had a little roller that you could roll on the gas and roll off the gas. Or when I'd roll into the secondaries, that little shot of gas would make the tires break loose. Crow, it's explosive. He'd pull out this little carburetor kit, took the accelerator pumps out, tune them down a little bit, and made the motor like have an electric motor and a rheostat. The motor was so smooth that you could ease out and ease back into it, or if you're just trying to sneak underneath somebody, you could do it so smoothly that we really worked on the mechanical end of everything, and he was a genius to read the books and teach the rest of it. He worked for a Chevrolet dealership, so he knew a lot about building motors, and we took it to heart. I mean, we had our own little machine shop that we could, couldn't turn cranks, but we could bore motors and do our own valve jobs. And we built a set of heads for that motor that back in the day you couldn't buy. You couldn't run aluminum heads. All you could buy is the blanks. Crowbar bought a book on Grumpy Jenkins, the pro stock drag racer. You got to have the ports this big, and he took a die grinder, hogged out the heads, made the ports that big, right where the push rod area is, ground right through it. And then took epoxy and epoxied a little sleeve right there, and so the motor made tremendous horsepower for homemade motors. You couldn't buy you could buy the technology. You couldn't afford the technology then. And it's things like that sparked our interest as much as spending the money to do it. It was fun.
I see the smile on your face, and the camera will pick up, the passion that you had, and still do. Here you are. You've been out of it for over 30 years. It's remarkable. What's the question you expected that we would ask today as you're driving up that we haven't asked you, Lars?
Probably how easy it was to walk away, and it was impossible. I guess I had a bunch of hand problems. Most of the crew had been off and married by then, and I couldn't run the car anymore. I had Troy running it a lot. When I sold it, the Norton, I said, "You buy everything. Lock, stock, and barrel." And all he wanted was the motor, and so his kid brother bought the chassis and made a limited late out of it. And I didn't go to the races for years and years. And then when Jim and Jean bought the Track Scott, my wife Brenda, Jim and Jean have been like second parents to me. They are such great people that my wife worked for the whole time. They worked the track 2 or 3 days a week, especially on the computer side and payroll and all that, trying to keep things smooth. I'd help Jim some, but she really, and that got me back into going a lot again. And one cute Scott story is back in the day, having hand problems. So Troy Johnson was driving my late model, and it was all hooked up to my motorhome. So I said, "Troy, you take my motorhome." I took Troy's motorhome, and we went. Jim and Jean and Brenda and I went to Michigan to the NASCAR race. Troy took our motorhome, went Stateline Erie, and we ran into Squirt Johns up there. And for a weekend, I listened to Jim Scott and Squirt Johns talk racing back in the day. And so educational and so much fun. And we get back home to Garland just about time David's getting home from Erie. David was running that Cadet he had that was kind of illegal. But he started out, and we pulled in the driveway, and everybody gets out of their vehicles, and "How'd you do, David?" And he starts out, "Well, I started 14th, and I passed this car, and this lap I passed that car, and about the 13th lap." And he said, "I'm up to this position. Oh, Lars, your motorhome caught fire." And on the 14th lap, and then, it goes on and on and on. And at the end, I won the race. Whoa, David, stop. Whoa, back up to lap 13. What'd you say? And the motorhome we had an aftermarket generator in it, and in the middle of it all, a fuel line had come loose and caught the motorhome on fire, and luckily they got it right out. It didn't hurt nothing. But did David tell it right in the middle of the race? What is going on? But that's the relationship that we had with the Scotts. And David, like I say, we've watched him grow up since he's that big, and he's like a brother to me or whatever. But It's just a lot of fun in them days.
Lars, do you ever think about where your career would have ended up without hand problems? Because you had a tremendous career, better than most.
Yeah.
But you were limited
Yeah.
because of your
Extremely
hand problems.
limited,
Do you ever
yeah.
think about that?
Yeah, but hey, I'm still here, and they still move, so I'm just thankful for what God gave me. You know, it's parts of it were very first years, having small hands. I'd grip the steering wheel and got spoke steering wheel, ripped the thumb off, and they built a new thumb or joints out of tendons. But from then on, I had a lot of infection problems, and mainly because I was in parts cleaning, solvents, diesel fuels, and all that at work 8 hours. Come home, I run my own shop for 8 hours. So the parts solvents, I never realized all that black in there's bacteria, and I kept getting cellulitis, skin tissue infections, and it wasn't until years and years later they diagnosed you with MRSA infection, but you put it dormant or put it to sleep, but it never really goes away. So it didn't take a lot for me to end up with a lot of serious. And nobody wore gloves back then. You didn't think that was important. You know, it just wash your hands in gas or whatever. But they've sliced and diced, like I say, 10 times. So, but we had a lot of fun.
Well, we've had a lot of fun here today listening to you. This has been
I
terrific.
appreciate what you do for motorsports. All motorsports. After looking at your Chautauqua sports here, it's amazing how many people come from out of this area to make this the museum it is, and for Randy for the hours, and you guys for these videos. I've spent hours watching these videos, and some of them are before my time, and a lot of them are after my time. Like the Arm Boosters, they were just coming in about the time I got out, and I've known Danny. In fact, we sat with him the other night and really enjoyed that family. I mean, quite a crew, but I didn't realize all his accomplishments, you know, and
Everybody's got a story, but now they'll know yours.
yeah, I appreciate it. Quick Larry Moore story. I know Arm Booster and Larry Moore are good friends. We were at Connie one night. Larry walks up to the track. I think it was about time we bought that car, but he stood up on top of the track, and they just got done water, and his feet go out from underneath him. He hits the turf, and he's laying on the ground, and he takes his fingernail, and he pokes his sneakers, and he says, "That compound's way too hard." He was a character. We had a lot of fun with him. So, no, I appreciate the videos.
Thank you. We're going to get a picture here.